We are live.
Yes. So, hello everyone. Welcome and good evening to all those in India, and good morning to Canada. Good afternoon to those joining us from the UK. Today is indeed a global webinar. We've got people from all corners of the world, and this is one effect that the pandemic has had, one good effect that the pandemic has had, besides the horribly negative things that have happened in the last 1 year. We are extremely pleased to present to you this session in collaboration with Green and Spiegel and a very new member, Pearson. This is on Canadian immigration, study permits, and the Pearson English language assessment for Canadian non-SDS education. Mobility across the world was affected last year, and as we progress to recovery, it is an important area where talent, especially students and skilled professionals, are concerned. Additionally, the Indo-Canadian Business Chamber focuses to help companies forge enhanced partnerships, expand their businesses, set up their operations, and immigrate their families, employees, etc. We are very pleased to have with us Mr. Stephen Green, Senior Partner at Green and Spiegel, to lead the session. Stephen has been practicing immigration law for 30 years and has extensive experience in all areas of Canadian immigration. He has been identified for many years as a leading practitioner in immigration law. Along with him is Mr. Erin Sari, who looks after business development. Erin's retail banking experience with international clients has led him to take a role with HSBC's Global Investor Immigration Services. A special welcome to Ms. Freya Thomas-Monk, Senior Vice President, English Assessment at Pearson. Based in London, UK, she leads the multinational delivery of assessment products to evaluate English proficiency and support English language learning. Freya has extensive experience working in the UK, US, India, and other markets, and is committed to promoting global education, in particular, English proficiency for study and employability. Welcome, Freya, and welcome, Stephen, Erin, all of you here. And I wish a very successful evening, both to our attendees and to our esteemed speakers. And with this, I hand it over to Stephen. Over to you, Stephen.
Good evening, everyone, and good morning to some of you. Thank you so much. And as you mentioned, Nadir, I'm going to talk about really, study permits and how students that are currently in Canada, perhaps, and students that are outside of Canada can apply to come to Canada and study. The Canadian government went ahead in March of last year and pretty much closed our border in order to evaluate what they would want to do with respect to anybody coming into Canada. So today I'm going to talk about, the travel restrictions that are in place, how does it affect students, and even a little bit about the startup visa program, which can help students that are currently studying in, business, innovative programs in India and wish to come to Canada. So as of last year, the government, as I said, closed our borders. However, they re-examined the situation with respect to students and recognized that students are very, very important to Canada. And therefore, they had to create policies to really help the students. And it really, in my opinion, has become a very welcoming policy for students that wish to come here to Canada. But again, the Canadian government also has to balance the safety needs of the population inside of Canada. So in January of this year, the Canadian government, like many other countries, introduced the requirement of anybody that is permitted to come to Canada must have a valid negative COVID test that was taken within 72 hours of the traveler's departure from their country. And I just want to stress once again that the information I'm giving you today is valid this morning. And as many of you know, every country's policies are extremely fluid. Canada is the same way. So you must always check with the Canadian authorities, or perhaps your Canadian lawyer, what is the current situation if you are planning to travel to Canada. So with the introduction of this particular COVID test requirement for everybody, the government also introduced, which is starting, it was supposed to be on February the 15th. They have started a new policy that anybody who flies, and again, I'm stressing flies into Canada, will require the COVID test 72 hours prior to their departure to show the airline that they have this test. And then when they arrive inside of Canada at the border, they will have to demonstrate to the authorities at the border that they have booked a hotel through a special government website, and that they will then be taken to that hotel and will be administered a COVID test, and they must wait in that hotel for up to 3 days to get that negative COVID test results. But it's important to understand that each traveler has to pay their own fee with respect to that hotel while they are waiting. And that could be upwards of 3,000 Canadian dollars per person who is waiting in the hotel. And in the hotel, you must, of course, be quarantined in your room. They will provide you with meals, internet, but you are basically waiting in your room until you receive your negative COVID test that you took upon arrival into Canada. So you see 2 tests are required to begin, one before you leave and one you arrive, and then you wait for the results. Once the results are issued, then you are able to leave the government quarantined hotel, but must continue your quarantining to a total of 14 days from when you arrive. So the process is you land in Canada on the airplane, you then go into the government hotel, wait for your test, and then you continue your quarantining based on the quarantine plan that you had when you arrived in Canada. So really, it's just a matter of shifting from the government hotel to where you're going to stay as a student waiting to begin your studies. It's important to understand, however, that we have different rules between the United States and the rest of the world. If you are traveling into Canada to come here as a student via the United States, but enter through a border crossing at a road crossing, then you are not subject to the hotel requirement. So many students are looking at that option where they will fly, for example, from India to Detroit, then cross the border from Detroit into Canada, which is at the Windsor area, and then they can quarantine 14 days based on their quarantine plan, but they do not have to go to a government approved hotel. So you can see the difference for various individuals with the way they go ahead and enter Canada. Now, students that are currently inside of Canada are permitted to apply for an extension of their study permit that they're here on. Many times, depending if you're in public school or in university, there are certain requirements that the immigration officer needs to see before they will extend your study permit. One of them, for example, with respect to university or colleges, they need to see an acceptance letter that you've been accepted to continue on in your studies. A lot of the university departments perhaps are closed in that area. So the government said they will not necessarily refuse your application to extend your status. You must file before your study permit is going to expire while you are in Canada. And you must explain to them saying, hey, I'm going to university in Canada. The university is not in a position right now to give me a letter showing that I'm continuing in my studies. Please hold on to my application, and then you will have something called implied status, which permits you to stay in Canada and to continue on with your studies. They do not, and again, I'm talking about people that are in Canada, for example, on a visitor visa that got accepted into school. They get this approval letter from the Canadian High Commission, for example, in India, and they then have to initiate that approval. Some people would go to the border. You cannot go to the border to get your study permit. It's not permitted, but the government understood that they don't want people leaving the country if they are inside of Canada and have been approved for their study permit at an embassy or high commission abroad. And they now have the ability to apply inside of Canada for their actual study permit that they've received approval for. And again, I just want to stress that if there are missing documents within the processing of your application for a study permit, be it inside of Canada, be it outside of Canada, the government is told to, hold on and wait until the student can give you the appropriate information and then continue to process. And again, here is an example of someone that applied for a study permit at the Canadian High Commission in New Delhi. They would then be given a multiple entry, most times visa, which is that sticker on the right-hand side of your screen, and also an accompanying letter that says, hey, you can pick up your study permit upon entering inside of Canada. But it's very important that you understand that you have to make sure that there is a reason for you to be inside of Canada, that your course is just, not online, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it also permits, once you get your study permit and you are inside of Canada, you have the ability to work up to 20 hours a week on your study permit. And when you enter Canada and you begin your studies and you graduate, a lot of students say, hey, I want to be able to work after I complete my studies. And the government of Canada has a special program permitting students after they graduate to get something called a postgraduate work permit. And what that is a document provided to students that meets certain criteria, and we'll talk about it in a second, that they can go ahead and begin to work after their graduation from a Canadian designated learning institution. And it's very important that you are going to a designated learning institution that's approved by the Canadian government and not a school that is a private type of school. So you must check with your school that you're going to whether or not they are a designated learning institution, and by attending at that school, it permits you as a graduate to get something called a postgraduate work permit. And the reason why this is so important to get a postgraduate work permit is that Canada has a pathway for immigration to Canada for students that graduate from Canadian institutions that are approved and have a minimum of 1 year work experience inside of Canada. And it's interesting that last Thursday, the Canadian government, through this express entry system, which permits people to indicate that they have graduated from a Canadian institution, that they have a minimum 1 year work experience, and they go into this pool, and the government invites people to apply for immigration under a program or a pathway to get immigration called the Canada Experience Class. They invited, unlike in the past where the numbers were between 4,000 to 5,000 people every 3 weeks, they invited 27,000 people that were in this pool. And of those people, 90% of the people invited were in Canada working as a result of a work permit or as a result of the postgraduate work permit program, and that they had graduated from a Canadian institution. But as many of you are aware, with the pandemic, things have closed in your country, things have closed in the Canadian environment, and generally postgraduate work permits were only available for a maximum of up to 3 years, depending on the length of study. So if you studied for a short period of time, between 8 to 12 months at a college, you would only be given a 1-year work permit after graduating. And that's why we encourage so many people to apply for, universities or colleges that are 2-year diplomas or more, because that provides you with a postgraduate work permit for up to 3 years. And remember that I indicated that there is a pathway for immigration, but you must have that minimum 1-year skilled work experience in Canada. And a lot of students that were on postgraduate work permits weren't able to meet those requirements of that 1-year work experience, or perhaps needed 2 years work experience. And the government understood that. And this shows how important students are to Canada, that the government amended their policy that if you are in Canada by January 27, 2021, and you held a postgraduate work permit, then you could apply for an extension of a further 18 months on your postgraduate work permit, so that you would be able to get enough points in that express entry system so you could get immigration to Canada. But again, you'll see that it's very important that you're involved in a designated learning institution, and that it's one of those schools that provides you with the ability to get a postgraduate work permit. And then again, the government of Canada is processing study permits. So you make sure that your application for a study permit is to a designated learning institution, and that the designated learning institution also has a readiness plan approved by the province. And what that means is that the federal government, which is all of Canada, which is responsible for the issuance of study permits, has a list of designated organizations, schools that they are approved. But they say, even if you're on that designated list, your school in the province that you go to must also be approved by the province, that they have a proper COVID plan for you as a student when you come into Canada. So again, you must go ahead and be aware of that. Now, some students have been approved for their study permits, but are still in India because of travel restrictions, because perhaps their course is not actually providing in-class ability. So a lot of students were very concerned, saying, hey, wait a minute, I've applied for my study permit, I got approved for my study permit, but my classes are all online and I just can't get to Canada right now. But I'm worried because as the time is going on, 1 year, 2 years, or maybe I was in my last year, or I was at college, I'm getting ready to graduate. How am I going to meet the postgraduate work permit program? Because it used to be that you had to spend at least 50% of your time inside of Canada, not online. But the Canadian government has amended that requirement now, that if you are in India and doing your course online, and you have your approved study permit, then you will be able to apply for a postgraduate work permit and come and work in Canada. So again, you see how important students are to the Canadian environment. So that's my sort of general comments on study permits. Canada is open for students. Canada is open for online studying. Canada is open for postgraduate work permits, and Canada is open under the Canada experience class in the express entry pool. So again, please check the website, contact the High Commission, contact us if you want, with respect to, has anything changed, what's going on, before you sort of jump into a study permit, a postgraduate work permit, because as I said, things are always changing. And I'll just quickly go over a startup visa program, which is a program for students, for example, that maybe have a really cool, neat, innovative idea, and they're studying in engineering in India. And they don't have a study permit, but they are students that are in India, that are perhaps finishing up their Bachelor of Science degree, that are maybe working in an incubator at their university. And they say, you know what, I don't want to come and study in Canada. I want to come and get my PR, my immigration to Canada. And there is a program that if you have a cool, innovative idea that will create jobs in Canada, then you can make a presentation to one of these three organizations, which are either a venture capital fund, angel investor fund, or a business incubator. And if they like your idea and think that it's cool enough, they will give you a letter of support to get your PR for the purposes of entering Canada to start your cool, innovative idea. The requirement is that you have to have a cool, neat, innovative idea, and that, of course, you have to be able to speak basic English, a CLB of 5, and you can then go into this program, come to Canada, and you get your immigration, your PR, in approximately 12 to 16 months. So it's a pretty cool program for students that do not want to come and study in Canada, are graduating in India, have this really neat, innovative idea, and they want to come to Canada. So that's really my program, that I'm going to talk about today. I hope the information was helpful for students that are thinking about joining the Canadian ecosystem, either as students or as startup applicants. And you can see how much the Canadian government recognizes the importance of students, because they've really expanded the rules as much as possible to help students come to Canada and find a pathway to immigration.
Thank you, Mr. Green, for that good insights on immigration, especially for students and the startup visa and the COVID-19 updates. I now move on to request Freya Thomas-Monk to make her presentation on her English language testing from Pearson.
Happy to do so. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you. And thank you, Stephen. I enjoyed listening to that. I would very much agree that students are important to Canada. I sit here in London, but I could see the sort of Canadian beacon in terms of welcoming students over the borders into Canada. And I would also very much agree that everything is changing at the moment. So keeping an eye on how the rules and the regulations and how governments all around the world are sort of adjusting and adapting to the post-pandemic world is fascinating, and also really important that we keep on the ball and is constantly serving that change. I think, Suvit, you're kindly going to show the slides that I prepared. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. I'll share the screen now.
Thank you so much. So it is great to be here with everybody today. Wish it was in person as ever. I've very much enjoyed traveling to both India and Canada in the past, and they are really key, important countries for us at Pearson. We've got a long history of working in both countries, and it's really fantastic to have an opportunity to link the two together. As we work in India and as we work in Canada, we speak to and hear from people on the ground, such as learners, parents, teachers, agents, universities, trade bodies, and of course government institutions, and we listen intently as to how we can best support you all. So my purpose here is to talk to you about how our Pearson Test of English can help you all, but also to reflect here on what we see around key learner trends, student mobility, and sort of more picture in terms of what people are seeking to get in the post-pandemic world. Thank you, Shuvik. So Pearson Test of English, you can obviously take a look at it on screen yourselves, but we call ourselves the English test that's ready when you are, and I urge you all to take a look in your own time as to what that is. Thank you, Shuvik. Great, so the Pearson Global Learning Survey, every year or so, we conduct quite an extensive survey of young people and old people based all around the world. In this case, we did 7,000 people and we asked them a number of different questions. This surveyed people from 7 key countries, and this included India and Canada as 2 of those 7, as well as people from Australia, Brazil, China, the UK and the US. This slide here outlines the key trends we uncovered and which all of us, whether we be teachers, learners, institutions or education providers, we all need to respond to and we all need to adapt to. For me, the telling point here is a 40-year career is giving way to an era of reinvention. The traditional linear career path is a thing of the past, and people are really moulding learning and work into what they need it to be in today's world, which means lifelong learning and diverse career paths. I think this resonates with the point Stephen was making around innovation and entrepreneurship. And again, we see these needs for reinvention, for innovation, and for people to thinking about their careers in quite a different ways than they might have done perhaps 10, 20 years ago. Thank you, Shuvik. We took a look at what the survey is telling us in terms of India specifically. We found that most people from India ended up choosing a career based on what they majored in, but that a number, 31%, ended up switching careers later on. In India, unsurprisingly, for those of us who have spent a lot of time there, 71% of people perceive higher education as being the critical engine for economic recovery. But the pressure is on to build skills that will sustain people through the pandemic and beyond. And 80% of our correspondents said exactly that. They knew they needed to build their skills to grow on into the future. 76% of people also believe that traditional retirement is old-fashioned. No surprise there. 25% said they want to retire to start their own business. And another group of people want to do a second career doing something they love or a part-time job to get some sort of income. Again, we see these trends particularly strongly in the Indian respondents to the survey. We see markets like India, China, Brazil and Hispano-America are leading the way in workforce upskilling. The US lags behind on that. People in China, India, etc. are more likely to be upskilling their careers and in more ways to build both their human skills and the technology skills they need to do so. We asked about the types of training people felt they needed. And the ones that came to the top of the list were, not surprisingly, new technology or software, or accounting for skills they hadn't learnt in college. Thank you, Shubik. Now looking to the post-COVID world and what this looks like for us. Should we turn to the next slide? Thank you. Although international student travel took a huge hit in 2020, and we're still seeing that on into 2021, due to the pandemic and of course the travel restrictions that Stephen's already talked about, there's still a real desire amongst students to want to travel abroad and to experience university life in a different country, Canada in this case. We've seen this across our Pearson Test of English business. Now, volumes were down last year, of course, because people are still booking tests in anticipation of being able to travel at some point. But where people haven't been able to take tests due to test centres being closed or their plans being put on hold, they're still taking advantage of all the preparation and English language learning materials to keep themselves ready. There have been a lot of studies on the international education market in the last 12 months of people who have tried to foretell what is going to happen post-COVID. We've seen through many of these, there is a real desire for face-to-face learning and that more than half of people will consider switching study destination to get this. And I find that interesting. So if Canada is able to place itself as a very popular choice of people able to go and do face-to-face learning as opposed to online learning, that gives Canada a really good advantage compared to some of the other countries. Thank you, Shuvik. So you might wonder, what can you do with Pearson Test of English in India to study in Canada? Well, we've got 38 centres across India, test centres, and you can go to our website and book to take a test in any one of those. And PTE is recognised by the IRCC if you're applying to get a general visa application for study. So it's not yet recognised, for example, the SDS route, but it certainly is for the general visa application for study. From what we can tell, 55% of Indian students use this route, so it is very useful. And we're certainly seeing through our own data the desire of people taking tests for that purpose as we go. It's recognised by universities and colleges across Canada. Nearly all universities and colleges recognise PTE for admissions purposes into their universities to study for most courses. So please take a look at our website and indeed university websites for that information. And there's no limit in terms of the number of places you can send your PTE scores to. As I mentioned before, we've got some good preparation materials there to help people prepare for the test, to learn the English they need. Our aim here is to make sure that when people land in a university in Canada, they have the English skills they need to fully access the course and to do their very best. Thank you, Shuvik. So I'll ask Shuvik in just a minute to play a video from this, but also just a couple of notes, what we hear from our students. I mentioned before that we spend a lot of time listening to our customers to understand what their experience is and how we can best serve that. We hear from them, and you can hear from the quotes and in the video, that what people like the speed, they get their scores back. Usually within 1.5 days, people get their scores returned back to them after they have taken the test. And the fact that there is availability of the test dates all around the year. You can book online 24 hours a day, and you can easily get access to test centres. So, you know, in terms of availability, it's very good. Now, Shuvik, let's give this video a go. I know these things don't always work online, but we'll give it a go if that's okay. Let's see, how's it going? Give it a couple of seconds. Maybe I could just take a look at couple of these questions that have come through. Aha, here we go.
My name is Kuriakos Jacob, and I'm doing this video to share my experience regarding the PT exam which I recently attempted. The safety precautions which were there on the exam center was quite appreciable. I was asked to use the hand sanitizers upon arrival on the exam center, and the invigilator shared instructions like covering my nose and mouth upon sneezing and coughing. In my opinion, the exam center in which I took the exam was very safe.
Thank you, and thank you for handling the technology there. I really appreciate it. That brings me to the end of my speedy overview in terms of how we're seeing global learner trends, how we're seeing in the post-COVID world a never ceasing end of appetite for people to go abroad, to study, to learn, to pursue their ambitions. I look forward to being part of that journey for young people wishing to move from India to Canada. I think that it is extraordinary in the impact it can have both on those individuals and on the world more generally. If you'd like more information about us, then please take a look at our website. And I look forward to any questions, thoughts and comments that you may have. Thank you for inviting me today. It's very good to be here with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Freya, for that lovely presentation. I think we can start with the first question here on the chat box if you want to. It's especially on the English language assessments.
Okay. The question we've got here is, what are English language assessments considered CIC? Now, I need someone to help me. What do we mean by CIC?
So CIC is the old name for Citizenship Immigration Canada, and now we're back to IRCC, which is Immigration Refugee Citizenship Canada. So the same thing. So go ahead.
Now I fully understand it. Didn't understand the old terminology, so forgive me. So now I know that the tests that are typically accepted for visa purposes are IELTS and TOEFL in some cases. Duolingo is not typically accepted for visa purposes, but as I said, Pearson Test of English is for that one visa category that I spoke about, which is where people are making a general application for study purposes. I think the IRCC website, last time I looked at it, had good information on this in terms of what tests are required for each category. Stephen, you may have more to add on that point.
Yeah, I mean, as far as English testing goes, it's the universities and colleges that really concentrate on that. So as Freya says, it's the university and colleges that you have to work with and satisfy them that your English language is at the appropriate level. So, that's how it works from my experience with respect to, getting accepted into these universities and colleges and things like that.
Great. Mr. Green, we have a question. I have attendee email me a question. He
Mhm.
wants a clarification on the mandatory hotel stay requirement you had mentioned. So basically, he has quoted people who travel by air for non-essential reasons, such as vacation, versus traveling to Canada, which may be considered essential if you have all the required documents and your DLI is on the approved
Okay.
list. So based on the most recent exemption, that is Feb 1st, are students not exempt from hotel stay?
No, students, no one is exempt from a hotel stay if you fly into Canada, unless the government determines that you are an essential worker and that you have to, go to work the next day. So for example, if you happen to be a nurse and you were urgently needed for reasons like that, then you have to apply and get that exemption. But you must take the position that any international student coming into Canada by air is subject to the hotel requirement, waiting there for a maximum of 3 days until you get your COVID results. That does not apply to people that cross a border by car. Those people still must quarantine like everyone else for 14 days, but you are not required currently to go into a government hotel. And if you have an approved study permit by the Canadian High Commission, that's considered essential travel, and the airline will let you board the aircraft to Canada. But again, you will be subject to the hotel stay and the continuation of the quarantine.
Great, thanks, Mr. Green. I see one attendee called Mr. Manoj Kumar who has raised his hand. Mr. Manoj, can you post your question on the chat box? In the meantime, Freya, would you like to expand on a little bit those potential students who are looking to take the Pearson language test here in India? What would be the criteria? I mean, they can obviously get more details on the website. But how is that program designed for Indian students here?
I certainly can, and I can also perhaps cover off a question that's come through around Homepaced edition, so I can talk about that as well. In fact, I may do that first if you don't mind, because I think it's a fairly quick answer.
Please.
So one of the trends we saw last year through all forms of assessment around the world, whether this be at schools, universities, English assessments, whatever, was the shift from people being able to go into a classroom or a test centre to take tests and people needing to do it remotely at home in front of a computer, as we all are today. So that shift to, sometimes it gets called remote monitoring or something like that, was quite an interesting trend of the pandemic. So there are many tests, that English language tests, that allow you to take that at home instead of in a test centre. We have some of them in our portfolio within Pearson. However, my observation is that governments don't tend to allow for the at-home based editions for visa purposes, but quite often universities will for their admissions purposes. And much as Stephen was saying at the beginning of this call, watch out because the rules may change. So it's a case by case, figure out whether an at-home is allowed versus the need to go to the test centre. You will typically find that the home-based test is very similar or identical to the test in the test centre. What differs, of course, is the security and the sort of ID verification that goes around it. So I think I've just answered that question there. In terms of how do you take the Pearson Test of English, the PTE, the question you asked me there, as I said, we've got 38 test centres scattered across India, and I would hope, therefore, that particularly if you live in a city or nearby, they are quite good locations. What you need to do is you go online to pearsonpte.com, you hit book a test, and you go through the booking process. As you work your way through that process, you get the choice of test centre and the day of the, what day of the week, what time of the day is suitable for you. We tend to have good flexibility so that you can take a test around your work schedule or your home commitments. So you can choose when to take the test. At that point, you pay for it, obviously, and then when the test comes up, it can be a day, a week, or a month later. You can choose when to take the test. You arrive at the Pearson Test Centre. You need your passport, you need your ID, and you get booked in to take the test. Now, the test takes up to 3 hours in one single sitting. So you arrive at the test centre, you take the test, it's finished within 3 hours. all of the skills around writing and reading and speaking and listening are tested at the same time. And then you go home and you receive the score via an email that alerts you to go collect your score just a day or so later. Did that answer your question, Suvik? I was attempting to sort of lay it out
Yeah.
step by step in terms of what you need.
I mean, it's a good summary of that criteria.
And I can see one of the participants, Neil, thank you for pointing this out. So Neil is saying to us, do you think the Versant test might be a proper solution for an at-home test for schools? Yes, please. Versant is a really good Pearson test. It tests the same skills as the Pearson test of English does. It's designed for slightly different purposes, but it is certainly a good at-home test and has remote monitoring capabilities, so you can take it at home and the score is valid for many purposes. Again, more information on our website there, but I think the way that Versant is designed for that at-home experience has been a really good innovation we brought forward in the middle of last year.
Great, thank you. Mr. Green, from an immigration point of view, I know you have covered some of the study permit requirements and COVID, updates, but what is your advice right now for all those students who have been restricted by, to travel and attend their colleges or where they have gotten admitted? Some may have had to postpone their plans. Some are still seeking to attend their session. So at this point of time, what general advice would you give them?
Well, as far as changing plans and not actually studying online right now, and they've been approved for a study permit, they must go back to the Canadian High Commission and explain to them now they're going into a different course. It's been perhaps more than 150 days, and that seems to be the number that the government uses, that if you haven't studied for 150 days, meaning you didn't go online, you didn't join your course, you have to go back and reapply for a new study permit. If you can get to Canada, and again, there's a reason for you to be in Canada and you've got that approved study permit, perhaps there are tutorials that you can enter because some of the schools do have that, then I would recommend come, because it may facilitate your ability in the future for a pathway to immigration. But again, you have to check everything online before you decide to come. If you are studying online now and you've not applied for a study permit, you will not be able to take advantage of many of the programs that the government is offering. So I encourage people to apply for their study permit if they plan, hopefully when things open up, later in the year, we're crossing our fingers, that you'll be able to enter Canada, because again, study permits are very important as far as the Canadian government is concerned. So check what the government's doing. If your school is reopening, for example, maybe they're offering summer courses now and they will be permitting people to attend in class part-time, then proceed to see if you can come to Canada and things like that.
Great. And for the other group, like such as startup, those who are applying for startup visas,
right?
Has there been any restrictions from the incubator side?
Absolutely not. The Canadian government is processing, all startup visa application. It's actually one of their number one priorities, because it will help the economy, create jobs, things like that. So that program is proceeding as if there was no pandemic or restriction. So, you will apply, you'll meet with the designated organization, they'll approve you, you process your application, you get your, approval, and there is nothing prohibiting that except perhaps providing appropriate documentation, because again, you're going to need to show the Canadian government that you do not have a criminal record. So you need an updated police report from every country that you've lived in since your 18th birthday. You're going to need a medical exam to get done. You got to make sure you have biometrics to check your fingers and your eyes. And you'll also need a recognized English test for that particular program under the startup visa program. So no, it's moving, it's proceeding like all permanent resident applications, be it family class, immediate family members, things like that.
Great, thank you so much. Freya, one question again on the English language testing. Many in the audience are part of private schools here in India, and there are prospective students, they're still in high school, uh, and their parents. So any indication on how does the Pearson language testing, what sets it apart? I do know that it's driven by artificial intelligence mechanism. So do you want to give a few insights on that?
I'm happy to. Thank you so much. And, good luck to everyone working on their language skills at the moment, participating in private language schools and in private schools more generally. English is seen by many to be a really important part of global mobility and people accessing and making the most of their careers and studying abroad. But I wish every student all the very best of luck. I know it's not straightforward. I know from my own experience in India, there are so many great quality schools that do great quality language learning teaching. And it has been such a pleasure to see the online experience also really blossom last year, so that there's good access to the courses for people to learn the language skills that they need. I think that's serving our market really well, and I hope people are finding it easy to tap into the quality of learning support that they need around English language. Yes, our tests, well, first of all, they are tightly linked in with our learning resources that we have at Pearson. So many of you will recognise the Longman brand around our dictionaries and our learning resources, and also many of the different, what we call courseware, but the books and digital equivalents that get used within language schools. They are designed using the same definition of the English language, the global scale of English, as are our assessments. So they come together in a seamless way to support both the learning and the assessment, so that people can understand their level of proficiency of English at every step of their learning journey. We do have some advantages. You mentioned particular use of technology there that are at our fingertips. It allows us to do testing that is 100% digital. So when people take the Pearson test of English, it is a pure digital experience. There are no, when you go to a test centre, you will meet humans, certainly in terms of providing your ID, but once you get into the test centre environment, you are engaging with the whole of the test via the screen. And we're lucky enough to have technologies that allow us behind the scenes to really carefully analyse the level of spoken proficiency, written proficiency, and how well people do the reading and listening parts without requiring sort of human intervention at that point in the process. This allows us on a global basis to have a level playing field, so that everyone gets evaluated on an absolute level playing field in terms of their level of English proficiency, and allows us to get scores back to people very quickly. I know from experience, and also from talking to many customers, that the speed in which you get your result, whether that be a test result or a visa result, whatever it might be, is really important as people are keen to move forward in their ambitions. So we're pleased to be able to get the information back to people very quickly, and as we get scores back to people, be very precise as to where their proficiency lies. We can tell people whether or not their spelling is really good or their reading needs some practice, and be quite precise around our diagnostic of English proficiency, so people really know where to focus their attention if they want to move forward and to get different grades or a different learning experience.
Great, thank you so much for that. For those insights. I now ask, with that, I don't see any further questions on the chat box, so I'll ask Nadira ma'am to do the closing remarks.
Yeah.
Anything, Mr. Green, if you want to add anything?
Nope, I'm good.
Thank you, Shovik, for conducting that Q&A round. And I'm sure if there are other questions and people write to us with other questions, we'll forward them to you. But thank you so much, Stephen and Erin, for your input and for answering all those questions. As you said, Stephen, in today's world, number one, global mobility is a big problem. And when you started by saying that what you are saying applies to whatever's the latest that happened, that came out this morning, because it's really fluid. Everything keeps changing. You just don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to change tomorrow. So, it's thanks to you and the sessions that we're doing with you that we're able to keep informing our members, our associates, our guests, that what is actually happening, because there is a general anxiety all over, especially for people who have invested their time, energy in wanting to immigrate or wanting to travel to Canada. So, this is a great way of being able to give them this information. And we as a chamber are very keen to continue doing this and helping them. And also, Freya, today, education technology is really what is needed. And what you are offering, what Pearson is offering, is an excellent, excellent way of, for these people to learn these skills that are needed in today's world. So, I think both with Freya and with Stephen, we've, given a lot of information to both, whether it is students or parents or educators or businesses or people who are, wanting to immigrate. And I would really like to thank you all for taking time out and, doing this session with us. As a chamber, we continue to, expend our efforts to help institutions and individuals to be able to succeed in what they would, like to do in connection with India and Canada. So thank you very much. We look forward to more sessions like this. And as we close for the night, I would like to take this opportunity to inform you all that the ICBC will be having its annual gala on the 19th of March. This time it will be in a hybrid fashion. Normally we do it at the High Commissioner's residence. It's a huge black tie event and it's a great networking opportunity. This time, due to the pandemic, we are going to be doing something on a terrace. So it's going to be outside with all the restrictions being followed. But we will be doing it in a hybrid. So I would invite hybrid fashions. I'd invite all of you, either you join us either through join us either personally or through the digital platform, whatever you like. We will be having live streaming as well. With that, once again, thank you to all the people who attended, to all of you who've been able to, be our distinguished guests. And I would like to say good night. Please stay safe. We are still not over it. We're almost there. So guys, hang on for this last leg. All the best. Good night.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you.